API, or Application Programming Interface, is a messenger that takes a request and tells the system what to do. Huh? That doesn't mean much, does it? In this video, I'm going to explain to you exactly what an API is without all this confusing wording. I have over here a Skyscanner. If you've never used it, it's an aggregator website. I look for a flight from LA to New York, and it searches all the websites, all the airlines for the best deals for me. Now, how was it able to do that? It found all these flights from different websites, but Skyscanner doesn't really have this information. I mean, this information is somewhere in the database of each individual airline. But as an airline, you're interested in having this data on Skyscanner because people like myself that want to book a flight might not know to go to AmericanAirlines.com. So by having their information listed on a website like this, well, now they can increase their revenue. So how is Skyscanner able to do this without having this information themselves? Well, that's where APIs come in. If you remember, APIs is what allows strangers to speak to each other so that we aren't in a closed system. We can share data and work with each other. And APIs is what allows machines, computers, to communicate. This might sound familiar. It's kind of like how we had web browsers speaking with servers, right? Well, yeah, because API is a broad topic. It applies to the way machines communicate. If I open up my console here, well, I always mention that there's a window object, and the window object has fetch. And fetch is an API. It is given by the browser to use so that I can communicate with this machine, that the console can communicate with the browser. In the same way, although Skyscanner doesn't have access to the databases of American Airlines and Alaska Airlines, all the other airlines use APIs or give access to this information through APIs so that websites like Skyscanner can have the information as well and list it on their websites. The best way to think about it is kind of like a waiter. You're sitting at a table, about to order, and the waiter is the messenger that tells the kitchen what to do. The kitchen is providing the waiter, the restaurant, right? The restaurant is saying, hey, waiter, these are the menu items. Please go ask the customer what he or she wants and let us know so that we can prepare it. And this might sound similar to this, right? We're asking another machine for something using, let's say, a waiter, and this machine gives us a response if we talk to it in a certain way that it expects. And yeah, a server has APIs, ways that you can communicate with it, such as doing users/about. In the same way, we also have our code previously from when we built RoboFriends. React, which is a library built by Facebook, exposes an API, a way to communicate with the React package by doing React component and using JSX. They tell us how to communicate with it, and we're able to communicate with it. Let's work on this a little bit more. What about this? Is this an API? It's the back of a TV. Yeah, it's an API. A TV works in its own way, but it gives you access to a couple of things, such as an HDMI cable, so you can plug into it and communicate with it, such as displaying your laptop into the TV. And we've been using APIs in the RoboFriends demonstration as well. We already talked about React, but You remember the JSON placeholder, the users that we got? Well, if I go to their website, we see that it's a fake online REST API for testing and prototyping. It's an API, so it must be giving us information about something that it has. If we go down, we see that it has resources, and the API tells us we can access them using these methods. So by just writing comments here, I should be able to get 500 comments. And there you go. I get a response in JSON. And even with RoboHash, remember how we were able to get images of robots from this, robohash.org? That's an API. We can say robohash whatever, and because they've said that the way to access this API is to just type in random numbers after robohash.org, we're able to access it. And people build these APIs usually for business reasons, such as airline companies, right? And they have the incentive to comply to industry standards, such as having JSON responses. And that way it makes easier for a developer like myself to grab bits and pieces from different places. For example, here I have the GitHub API. You can read up on it, but I can access information from GitHub. So I'm accessing the GitHub repo of Facebook, and it tells me how many followers it has, what bio it has. If I go to Apple, I can get the Apple username as well. And you can see that it's in JSON format because that is the standard. If we want to build something with GitHub, well, we can just send a request to this, get this data, and create our website based on this data. But it's not only JSON. If you remember, there's XML as well. This is a sample API that shows us a breakfast menu. And here we can request this data through HTTP and we get breakfast menu. So as you can see, APIs are not just websites. A TV's inputs and outputs, that's an API. An NPM package can be an API. Like I've said before, it's a way that people communicate or machines communicate and share information. Without it, we really wouldn't have what we have now with the World Wide Web. But how is this useful to us? Well, first off, we can build something like this quite easily. We can actually search API JetBlue, API American Airlines, and they'll have information on how we can access this data so we can build our own thing. This website, all it's doing is making an HTTP request, do something like here, and then grabbing this data and just adding some CSS to it to make it look nice. And there are a ton of APIs online. You can search them, you can read up on them. Big companies like Facebook have APIs, Google has APIs, and you might know Google Maps. Anytime you see Google Maps on a website, it's using the Google API. We also have silly APIs like this one of my favorites. It's the Star Wars API. It shows you over here, if I do people 2, I get C3PO. If I do people 3, I get R2D2. I can also do planets. This is a free, nice to use API. So you can build a sample app using the Star Wars API, and all you need to do is just fetch this resource, get the JSON, convert it to a JavaScript object, and then style it and use it in your app whichever way you want. There's also some really important APIs that, if you're building serious websites, are really useful. This is the Stripe API. If you want to incorporate payments into your website, well, this shows you exactly what to do, And you can add to your server in whichever language you want. In our case, we're interested in Node. And it tells you how you can add Stripe as a payment method on your server. It sounds scary, but it's all documented in here. It's step-by-step instructions of how to do it. Another one that I really like is the Twilio API. And Twilio allows sending of messages on phones. So using something simple like this, you can see there's not much to it other than using this client.messages.create that they provide. And we just say what we want the body of the text to be, to which number, from which number. If we want to include maybe a heart, then we can add that as well. And let's say when a user signs up for a service, well, we can send them a message by saying, hey, we've created a new user. They've provided us their phone number. Send them a text message. Now, you might be thinking, this is almost too good to be true. You have so much power now. You can just research APIs, and all the major websites have APIs, data that they give to you. Well, things like RoboHash and Star Wars API, they're silly and they're fun, and there's no real cost to them. But when you start building real applications and companies like Stripe and Twilio, where there's some real engineering effort behind creating these, well, they charge a service. And that's when you use something like an API key. And an API key looks like gibberish. It is a key, a private key, so that every time you access their API, they know that it's you. And because, let's say you have a plan for making 1,000 requests, they charge you because they can recognize you, saying that, oh, this is Andre's key. He's the one making the request from a server, and we're going to charge him for it. And don't worry, in our final project, we're going to be using a really, really cool machine learning API. And we're going to generate our API key and actually use it. Luckily for us, though, it's free. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But from this video, I want you to remember this. A server somewhere in the world for a company provides an API. In order for other people to use it, they usually tell you how to use it. And they have documentation on how to use it. But most of them comply with a standard like JSON to make it easier for developers like us to use. And at the end of the day, an API is a tool used for data communication. It's how a program, a software, or anything running code allows others to communicate with it. And it opens up a big possibility of making websites that do more than just list robots. You can now, with the same principles, build websites that incorporate different APIs to have the functionality of something like Skyscanner. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.